It was a night like this. Wet, slow, the air thick with that earthy smell only rain can pull from the ground. When I first saw the house on Ridgeway Hollow, I hadn't meant to end up there. My car had sputtered out somewhere between the old mill road and the forest line, my phone down to its final percent. When I saw a faint glow through the trees, I thought it was a porch light, a small mercy. But what I found wasn't a house in any real sense of comfort. It looked like it had been waiting, for years, maybe decades, for someone to knock. The place sat at the edge of a slope, half hidden by wild ivy and soaked leaves. The porch boards sagged like tired bones. I remember the rain dripping from the corners of the roof, each drop echoing through the hollow air. I hesitated before stepping up, my boots squelching in the mud. It wasn't just the look of the place, it was the quiet. The rain fell all around, but beneath that sound there was something else, a stillness that didn't belong. I thought maybe the house was abandoned, but the light said otherwise, a soft amber glow from inside, flickering as though from an old oil lamp that I knocked once. No answer. I knocked again, harder, and the sound rolled through the frame like it was hollow inside. Then came a voice, faint, almost fragile. "Come in if you need shelter." It wasn't what they said, but how they said it. Like they already knew I'd been standing out there longer than I had. I stepped inside. The air was stale, heavy with dust, and something faintly metallic. The entryway opened into a narrow hall lined with faded portraits, faces turned slightly away, eyes dulled by age. A wood-burning stove hissed in the corner room, and near it sat a woman wrapped in a blanket, her expression lost somewhere far from here. She didn't seem surprised to see me, just tired. "Storm catches people sometimes," she said, stirring a cup of tea that I hadn't seen her prepare. The sound of the spoon tapping the porcelain was rhythmic, measured. She gestured to a chair near the stove, and I sat. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The warmth from the fire reached only halfway across the room. The rest sat in dim shadow, where I could swear I saw movement. Nothing distinct, just the sort of flicker your mind makes when it wants to find shapes in the dark. She finally asked where I was headed. I told her I didn't know anymore. The hours slipped by, the rain softened. She asked if I could stay until morning. "The roads flood," she said. "Better not to go out when the ground starts shifting." When I asked what she meant, she just smiled, though it wasn't a kind smile. It was small, uncertain, like she was remembering something she wished she hadn't. That night, I slept in the old guest room upstairs. The walls creaked softly, and the smell of damp wood surrounded me. But just before I drifted off, I heard something I can't explain, a whisper, low and drawn out, coming from inside the wall. It said my name, once quietly, and then again louder. I woke in the dark, unsure of what time it was. The rain had become a thin mist, its rhythm gentler, like the world outside had fallen asleep. But the sound that pulled me from sleep wasn't the rain. It was something from within the house. A soft knocking, rhythmic and deliberate, like knuckles tapping on the inside of a wall. I thought maybe it was the wood settling, the way old houses sigh through the night, but it didn't fade. It grew clearer, closer, until I realized it was coming from behind the headboard of the bed. I sat up slowly. The guest room was small, a narrow window, a dresser warped by years of damp, and a door that didn't quite shut. My breath fogged faintly in the air. For a moment, everything went quiet again, and I almost laughed at myself for being nervous. Then the whisper returned. My name, drawn out like someone was learning how to pronounce it. "James." The voice was thin, genderless, almost curious. I pressed my hand against the wall, and it went silent. Then came a second whisper, not a word this time, but a sigh that felt like it moved the dust in the air. I pulled on my jacket and stepped into the hall. The boards moaned beneath my feet. The portraits on the walls looked different in the low light, not in expression, but in texture. Some of the faces seemed slightly distorted, as though the damp had warped the paint unevenly. The woman's door was half open at the end of the hall, a dull orange glow spilling out from her lamp. I thought about waking her, but something about that idea felt wrong. Like if I opened the door, I'd see something I wasn't supposed to. Instead, I went downstairs, thinking maybe the house itself was just old enough to have a heartbeat. Downstairs, the air was colder. The fire had gone out, leaving the smell of wet ash and soot. The kitchen sat beyond a narrow archway, small, with hanging copper pots that swayed slightly in a draft I couldn't feel. The window above the sink was fogged over, but I could see faint shapes moving outside. Not people, exactly, more like shadows shifting across the rain-slicked ground. I rubbed the glass to clear it, but by the time I did, there was nothing there. Only my reflection, pale and uncertain, and behind me, the faint outline of the woman in the doorway. She said nothing for a long while. Just watched me from the threshold. Her hair, which had been neatly braided before, now hung loose and dark, plastered to her temples. "You shouldn't walk around at night," she finally said, voice soft but firm. "It stirs things." I didn't know what she meant. When I asked, she only smiled that same strange smile. "The walls remember," she said, almost to herself. Then she turned and walked back toward her room, leaving me standing in the dim light of a dying storm. The rest of the night, I didn't sleep. Every few minutes, I'd hear that faint tapping start again, from somewhere inside the house, always moving, never stopping. When I finally opened my eyes again, I expected sunlight, the kind that breaks through after a long storm, washing everything clean. But the light that filled the room was the same dull gray as the night before. The rain hadn't stopped, only softened. The window pane was fogged, the trees beyond still dripping. I could hear the soft ticking of water against tin somewhere outside. For a brief moment, I thought maybe I'd only slept an hour or two. But my phone said 9:17 a.m., and the clock in the hall said the same. Though its second hand hadn't moved, I went downstairs. The house smelled faintly of wet earth and burnt wood. The woman was already at the stove, her back to me, stirring something in a blackened pot. "You didn't sleep much," she said without turning. Her tone was calm, too calm, rehearsed almost. I asked if the power was still out. She didn't answer. When she finally did speak, it was only to say, "It's better that way. The lights don't belong in old houses like this." There was no sound of a fire, yet I could see steam rising from the pot. I didn't ask how I sat at the table and tried to eat what she offered, oatmeal, or something close to it. It tasted faintly metallic, like it had been cooked with rainwater. I looked around the kitchen, the walls, the worn cabinets, the faded newspaper pinned near the pantry. That's when I saw the date on it. October 20th, 1993. The paper was yellowed, but crisp, not old enough to have been hanging there for 30 years. When I asked if she collected old clippings, she looked at me blankly. "Why would I?" she said. "That's this week's paper." Her words were steady, but I saw something flicker in her eyes, something that looked like fear later. I stepped outside for air. The rain had become a thin mist, curling low over the ground like breath. The woods were still, silent, not even the hum of insects. The dirt road that led to the house looked longer now, narrower, as if the trees had moved closer overnight. When I tried to check my phone for a signal, the screen flickered and froze, the battery icon stuck at 1%. I walked a few yards toward the bend, but with each step, the sound of the rain seemed to fade. When I turned back, the house looked smaller, almost tilted, like the ground beneath it was softening. The woman stood on the porch when I returned. "The road won't take you anywhere today," she said. Her voice carried strangely, as though the mist itself spoke. "It loops when the rain comes." I asked what that meant, but she only gave that same distant half-smile. "The hollow keeps what it finds," she whispered. Then she turned and went inside, leaving the door open. I followed her in, though I wasn't sure why. Somewhere deep within the house, I could hear that faint knocking again, slower now, but steady, like a heartbeat. By late afternoon, the gray outside had not changed. The light neither brightened nor dimmed. It simply lingered, like the day refused to move forward. I tried pacing the hallway to clear my head. Each board I stepped on answered with a deep groan, as if the house disliked being disturbed. That was when I noticed the smell, faint at first, metallic again, but now mingled with something sweet and stale. It seemed to come from the space beneath the floorboards. When I crouched down, the air there was warmer than the rest of the house. The woman found me kneeling near the stairs. "Don't pry," she said sharply, sharper than I'd ever heard her. Her eyes caught the light in a way that made them look glassy, reflective. I told her I'd heard something moving below, maybe a pipe or an animal. She shook her head. "There are no animals here. They don't cross the hollow." Then, softer, "It's only the house remembering itself." She said it as if it explained everything. Then she went back to her chair by the stove, leaving the silence to fill in the rest that I couldn't leave it alone. When she stepped outside later to gather wood, I pried at a loose plank near the parlor wall. It lifted easily, as though someone had already done it many times. Beneath, there was a hollow cavity lined with old fabric, and inside, a handful of objects. A man's pocket watch, a cracked photograph, and a ring still speckled with dirt. The watch had stopped at 9:17, just like my phone, just like the frozen clock in the hall. The photograph showed a man standing on the same porch, decades younger, but behind him, the same woman, unchanged. When she came back, I hid what I'd found. But something in her expression told me she already knew. She made tea again, though I never saw her heat water. "Storm's turning," she said quietly. "When the air thickens like this, the hollow opens. Things surface that should have stayed buried." Her words hung there, trembling in the space between us. The smell from beneath the floor seemed stronger now, and the steady knocking had returned. Louder, closer, like someone was climbing up from underneath. That night, I couldn't bring myself to sleep. I sat in the parlor with the old watch on the table, listening. Every few minutes, the ticking started, not from the watch, but from the walls themselves, as if they were trying to imitate time. Around midnight, the front door creaked open by itself. Rain mist drifted in, cold and thin, but there was no wind. Just beyond the threshold, faint footprints marked the wet floorboards, bare, small, leading in, not out. When I looked back toward the woman's chair, it was empty. Only the blanket remained, folded neatly, still warm. The footprints led toward the far corner of the parlor, to a narrow section of wall half covered by an old curtain. Behind it, I found a door. It wasn't like the others. This one was low, smaller, built from uneven planks that looked older than the rest of the house. There was no handle, only a rusted latch tied with wire. The air that leaked through the cracks was warm and damp, carrying the same metallic scent I'd smelled beneath the floorboards. I hesitated, but the sound from within, a slow, steady drip, drew me closer that I untwisted the wire and pulled. The door swung open with a sigh, revealing a staircase that sloped sharply downward. No light came from below, only the faint shimmer of rainwater glistening on the steps. I called out, half expecting the woman to answer, but the house stayed silent except for the rain above. I took one cautious step, then another. The air thickened as I descended, heavy with the smell of soil and mold. My phone light flickered, then steadied, casting long shadows that bent and twisted against the stone walls. The stairs opened into a low chamber, carved directly into the earth. The floor was half flooded, shallow pools reflecting my trembling light. Along the far wall were shapes, wooden crates stacked unevenly. Some collapsed into the water. And then I saw them, names scratched into the planks. Ruth M., Thomas A., and others too faded to read. One crate had been pried open, its contents gone. The space inside was lined with fabric, like a coffin. And beneath my boots, the water rippled, though nothing had moved. Then came the sound again. Knock, knock, knock. But this time, it wasn't above me. It was behind. I turned the light toward the stairs and saw bare feet on the bottom step. Small, pale, motionless. I froze. The figure that followed was thin, its skin the color of candle wax, eyes black as wet stone. It looked like a child, but its movements weren't right. Too slow, too careful, like a puppet learning how to walk. That IT didn't speak, only tilted its head as if listening. Then, with a whispering voice that wasn't its own, it said, "She keeps us dry when it rains." That I stumbled backward, hitting the crates. The water splashed cold against my legs, and the light flickered violently. The child thing moved closer, its face rippling faintly, features blurring like a reflection in disturbed water. I bolted up the stairs, slipping on the wet steps. Behind me, I heard that same voice again, but this time, there were several of them, overlapping, whispering from the walls, "Stay, stay until the rain stops." When I burst back into the parlor, the door slammed shut on its own. The woman stood by the fire again, calm, smiling faintly. "I told you," she said softly. "The hollow keeps what it finds." When the door slammed, the house shuddered. The floor under me felt alive, flexing with the sound of the storm. The woman sat motionless by the stove, hands folded neatly in her lap, as if she hadn't heard a thing. Her blanket lay untouched, the same place I'd left it, but now it was bone dry. The fire burned too bright for how little wood sat inside. "You went down," she said, still facing the flames. You shouldn't have done that. Her voice was quiet, almost kind, but the way the light touched her face, no shadows, no reflection in her eyes, made my stomach turn. And I asked her who was in the cellar. She didn't answer at first, only sighed, the sound of someone remembering something heavy. "They're what's left," she said finally. "When the rain comes, the hollow fills up. What it can't hold above, it keeps below." I told her I didn't understand. She looked up then, and I wished she hadn't. Her eyes were clear but wrong, like two panes of glass with water running behind them. "You will," she murmured. "You already do." And then I realized. Her lips hadn't moved. The voice came from everywhere at once, whispering through the walls, through the damp air itself. I backed toward the door, but every window I looked at showed the same thing. Rain, unending, and the forest bent under its own weight. The road beyond the porch was gone, replaced by the same patch of trees I'd seen the night before. The world outside had folded in on itself. I shouted, not words, just noise, and the woman slowly stood, her joints creaking like old hinges. "Storm's almost over," she said softly. "Then you'll see what's left of us." She began to hum, a tune so faint it barely rose over the rain. It was familiar, though I couldn't place it. As she hummed, the air thickened, the sound of dripping water filling every corner of the room. The portraits on the wall shimmered. For a second, each face seemed to turn toward me, eyes bright with recognition. "They listen when I sing," she whispered. "They remember better that way." Her hair had begun to move, gently, as though underwater, and the smell of wet earth filled the parlor, stronger than before. That I stumbled back toward the hall. Behind me, her humming deepened, echoing from the walls, from the floor, from beneath the stairs. The boards beneath my feet pulsed once, twice, like a heartbeat. When I looked back one last time, she wasn't by the fire anymore. The chair was empty, the blanket gone. But the flame kept burning, tall and silent, its light bending strangely, as if someone still sat in front of it. Outside, the rain began to slow, but instead of relief, an awful stillness settled. It felt like the house was holding its breath. When the rain stopped, it didn't happen all at once. It thinned into mist first, then into single drops that tapped the windows like fingers saying goodbye. The quiet that followed was immense. The air itself seemed to hum. I opened the front door and expected to feel relief, the clean air, the soft light of morning. But what came instead was stillness. No birds, no breeze. The world outside looked washed away, the forest standing in a silver haze. The road had disappeared entirely, replaced by a field of wet grass that I didn't recognize. The house felt different too. The walls no longer creaked. The faint heartbeat beneath the floor had gone still. I called out for the woman, but my voice felt swallowed by the emptiness. In the parlor, the fire still burned, impossibly steady. I walked closer, and that's when I saw them, faint outlines in the reflection of the glass, like people standing behind me. Not clear, just silhouettes, blurred by the shimmer of the flame. They didn't move, but I could feel them. Every time I turned, the air shifted, like I'd just stepped into the space they had left behind. On the table beside the cold teapot, the watch lay open again, ticking softly though its hands had not moved. A line had been carved into the wood beneath it. "When the storm ends, so do we." I didn't remember seeing it there before. The letters were shallow, freshly marked. I touched the edge of the carving and felt it tremble under my fingertips. It wasn't wood. It was warm. Somewhere deep below, I heard one last knock. 3 times. Then silence. I went to the window and looked out across the hollow. The mist rolled low, covering the ground like breath. For a moment, the world seemed to hold still, and then I saw them. Figures, half transparent, moving slowly through the fog, dozens of them. They didn't walk so much as drift, their outlines flickering like reflections in water. At the center of them all stood the woman, her pale dress clinging to her like wet paper. She lifted her hand and pointed back toward the house, not at me, but through me. And I understood then that she wasn't warning me. She was telling me to stay. The air in the room changed, lighter somehow, like the house was exhaling after holding its breath too long. The portraits on the walls began to fade, their colors draining until the frames held only emptiness. One by one, the shapes outside vanished into the mist. When I turned back toward the fire, it had gone out. The watch stopped. The house was still. And then, for the first time since I'd arrived, I felt something like peace. Not mine, but theirs. The hollow was quiet again. But I knew the rain would come back. It always does. And when it does, someone else will find the faint glow through the trees, and the door will open once more. It had been raining on and off for 3 days when I took the detour through Ridgeway Hollow. The GPS showed the road as a narrow gray line between the hills. Nothing remarkable. But I'd always been drawn to old roads, to places that felt forgotten. My name's Eli Turner. I was driving north, trying to make up time after missing my usual route. Around dusk, the rain began again, heavy enough that the wipers couldn't keep up. That's when I saw it. A faint amber glow through the trees, far off the road. A light that didn't flicker like headlights, but steadied, like a window to L. I don't remember making the decision to turn in. One moment, I was following the glow. The next, the road beneath my tires had turned from asphalt to dirt, slick and uneven. The forest thickened around me, branches hanging low and heavy with rain. The light grew brighter, closer, and then the trees parted. There it was. The house that IT looked old, but not abandoned. The porch lamp burned with a warm, golden hue. The same kind of glow you see from safe places in bad weather. I remember thinking how inviting it looked. I parked near the fence and stepped out. The rain smelled like iron. When I reached the porch, I noticed the boards were slick but sturdy, recently swept. Someone had been keeping the place. I knocked once, then again. No answer. I almost left, but the door creaked open, just slightly, as if nudged from the inside. "Hello," I called. The air that drifted out was warm and faintly sweet, like old tea and cedar smoke. I stepped in. The fire was lit, crackling gently in the parlor. On the mantel above it sat an antique pocket watch, open, ticking softly. Its hands pointed to 9:17. I wandered through the first floor, calling out now and then. The place was neat but strange, furniture covered with thin sheets, paintings turned to face the wall. In the kitchen, an old newspaper lay pinned beside the window. October 20th, 1993. The paper was crisp, edges clean, like it had just been printed. I laughed quietly to myself, thinking maybe it was a replica, a decoration. But when I brushed my hand against it, I could feel the ink still faintly tacky beneath my fingers, and somewhere upstairs, I thought I heard a voice whisper my name. Just once I froze. No one should have known me here. The sound was faint, could have been the house settling, or the wind through a crack in the roof. But it hadn't sounded random. It had sounded curious. I turned toward the stairwell, half expecting someone to be standing there. That's when I saw movement, not in the shadows, but in the reflection of the fire's glass. A figure standing by the window upstairs, half obscured by the curtain. Watching. When I looked up, the space was empty. But the faintest sound reached me from above, almost like a heartbeat beneath the floorboards, echoing through the wood. The staircase groaned beneath Claire's weight as she followed Nathan upward, each step creaking like an alarm. The storm outside had become a deafening presence, thunder rolling in long, drawn-out waves that shook the cabin's beams. The attic door loomed above them at the end of the narrow hall, a squat rectangle of wood that seemed to pulse in the flickering lamplight. The lullaby still hummed faintly through the noise, its off-key tune crawling under Claire's skin. Nathan gripped the knife tighter, glancing back to meet her eyes. "Stay behind me," he whispered, though his own voice betrayed a tremor. They paused at the landing. A sudden tap-tap-tap on the attic door broke the silence between thunderclaps. Claire swallowed hard, the poker feeling heavier now. The rhythm was almost playful, too deliberate to be the house settling. Nathan took a slow step forward, his boots leaving faint muddy prints on the carpet runner. The air felt colder here, as though the attic itself exhaled a damp chill. Claire's ears strained against the storm, catching another faint sound, the whisper of movement behind them, on the stairs they had just climbed. She risked a glance back, but saw only the empty stairwell below. Lightning flared through the hallway window, and for an instant, a distorted shadow appeared beneath the attic door, a pair of long, spindly legs that didn't match any human form. The light vanished, leaving only darkness and the sound of rain. Claire gasped involuntarily. Nathan's jaw tightened, and he mouthed silently, "Did you see that?" Before she could answer, the attic door creaked open an inch on its own. A stale gust of air swept out, smelling of damp earth and something older, something that didn't belong. Nathan raised the knife and nudged the door wider with his foot. The attic beyond was pitch black except for a single dangling string connected to an old bulb. He reached out, yanked it, and a sickly yellow light flickered on, casting jagged shadows across the cramped space. Boxes and old furniture cluttered the attic, but what caught Claire's eye was a circle of footprints pressed into the dusty floorboards. Large, wet prints that shouldn't have been there. Near the far corner, a section of the floor was unnaturally clean, as if something heavy had been dragged away recently. And in that far corner, half hidden by a stack of boxes, something shifted. The figure that emerged was hunched and pale, its movements deliberate but strangely fluid. Claire couldn't see its face, just the outline of shoulders too broad and arms that seemed to bend unnaturally. It took one step toward them, and the old bulb flickered violently. Nathan stepped in front of her, knife raised, but the creature, or person, didn't rush. Instead, it tilted its head, mirroring the same gesture Nathan had made earlier downstairs. A deep, guttural sound rolled from its chest, neither human nor entirely animal. And then, without warning, it lunged. Nathan shoved Claire backward, and the attic erupted in chaos as the storm outside reached a fever pitch. Darkness filled the hall the instant the light died. I stood perfectly still, notebook clutched to my chest, my own breath the only movement in the air. Below, the fire cracked once, or maybe that was the house shifting again. The woman hadn't moved. She simply watched, head tilted slightly, as though listening to something distant. I took a step backward, my heel brushing the open door behind me. Somewhere far below, a faint tick began again, slow and patient. The watch had started to move that I stumbled down the stairs, calling into the dimness, half hoping James might answer from whatever place had taken him. The rain had not yet returned, and the silence pressed harder the closer I came to the parlor. The fire still burned, but now the flame bent sideways, drawn toward the doorway that led to the cellar. From beneath it came the soft sound of dripping water, rhythmic, careful. Each drop landed exactly where the last had fallen, as though counting time. I realized with a sudden chill that the dripping matched the tick of the watch. The cellar door was half open. Warm air pulsed through the gap, smelling faintly of soil and something older, metallic. I could see the top of the stairs vanishing into blackness, and on the wall, faint carvings shimmered in the firelight. Hundreds of small names scratched into the wood. Some were little more than initials, others clear and fresh. My fingers traced the last one, James. Below it, a new space waited, smooth, unmarked. I didn't want to see my name there. I didn't want to understand why the house had saved room for it. Then the first drop of rain hit the roof. One, then another. The rhythm returned, steady and certain. The woman's voice rose through the floorboards, almost singing. She wasn't angry. She sounded relieved, like someone completing a long-forgotten ritual. Around me, the air shimmered with faint silhouettes, outlines of the others who had come before. Men, women, faces I almost recognized from the photographs upstairs. Each figure turned toward me, waiting. The rain grew heavier. I could hear it filling the hollow outside, washing the world away again. And over its sound came the last whisper. State I don't remember choosing. The notebook slipped from my hands, pages fanning across the floor. The watch on the mantel ticked faster, its sound weaving into the rhythm of the storm until they were one. I felt the warmth leave my body, replaced by a strange, luminous calm. The woman reached the bottom of the stairs and smiled. Not at me, but through me, to someone I couldn't see. When I opened my eyes again, the rain had stopped. The fire was burning low, and a car door closed outside, followed by footsteps on the porch. The hollow had found another traveler.